Curtis Sliwa wants to be New York City's next mayor. Is he up to the challenge?
The Post has questions. We're putting the candidates on the hot seat.
Can Sliwa, the Republican standard-bearer, defeat Democratic Socialist Zoran Mamdani and former Governor Andrew Cuomo?
Now, the Post takes on
Curtis Sliwa.
How are you going to balance the budget, and what specific items would you cut?
Well, the Citizen Budget Commission, which focuses on that, said I have the only plan to actually slash the budget, which is $118 billion. And it's an election budget with no reserve, no rainy day funds. This was all to try to get Eric Adams reelected. We saw what happened, right? He won and done. So 1 down, 2 to go. But we're going to suffer for that. But even before you get to the budget, you got to slash taxes. Income tax, property tax, corporate tax. None of these 2 remaining candidates are going to slash taxes.
But can you do that as mayor?
Well, you can. When it comes to property tax, the mayor controls that. And it's absolutely skyrocketing and forcing people out. So you look at the budget itself. The biggest obvious thing that needs cutting is the Department of Education. $41 billion out of $118 billion. That's 1/3 of the budget. Think about it, $42,000 a child we're spending now. That keeps accelerating.
And where would you specifically cut out of the DOE budget? What are some line items or some good solid examples you could tell voters of, here's where I'm going to clean up the mismanagement of spending?
Well, first off, you have a top-heavy management of 13 deputy chancellors. Nobody knows what they do. 50 department heads. You ask the principals who hire their staff and the teachers, you ever deal with the department heads? No. They were all at the Tweed Courthouse, Tammany Hall. Great place for them to be. Corruption Central. That's $10 billion right there. You just cut it. Even with all of that, $41 billion, teachers are still reaching into their pocket and paying for children's supplies. And then you have restorative justice. This is the worst thing that was ever conceived by the socialists. That means if I attack you, you're my teacher, you're my fellow classmate, I get put into a room with a moderator. As long as I cross my heart and hope to die never to do it again, I come back into the classroom. That means nobody gets suspended, nobody gets expelled, nobody gets arrested. So we have to protect the teachers and the students. All that additional money, 2/3 of which never goes into the classroom.
So just to summarize, so you would like to take a top-heavy budget of administrators and then really allocate a lot of those funds to the teachers to boost the quality of education. But also then, would there also be cuts at the top or just the reallocation?
No, and in fact, it wouldn't just be me. Bob Holden, who leads Democrats for Sliwa, was a teacher for 40 years before he became the Democratic council person of Middle Village, who's now term limited out. He would help me with that because he knows where all the bones are about. Gifted and talented. Zoran Mamdani wants to eliminate it. 100 schools out there. I want to double the number of gifted and talented schools because you really need that. He wants to eliminate the special tests to get into the special high schools that he went to, Bronx High School of Science. No. I want to keep the tests. So he's talking about a privileged young man who went to exceptional schools, did extraordinarily well. But he doesn't want that available to anybody else in the school system.
But even with the reallocations of funds, you think you could shave as much as 40 billion?
10 billion right off the bat with the Department of Education. And the Department of Buildings, maybe the most corrupt agency that has ever existed. You ask anyone who's trying to develop properties or fix properties or actually expand to a second business because they have the equity, they tell you the impediment is the Department of Buildings. I told Rudy when he was mayor, who I supported in Bloomberg, what are you going to do about the Department of Buildings? And it even got worse under de Blasio and Eric Adams. So what you do is, boom, you blow it up and you start it all over again so that people who are developing in New York City are being given a fair shot instead of constantly giving tickets.
And just before we move on to the next topic, are you open to layoffs of government employees or possibly curtailing certain services that are being offered right now?
I went through the late 70s when they had to do that, Ed Koch coming in because of the Fiscal Control Board. You had Felix Charlton, Victor Gopbaum, who invested their monies to keep the city afloat. We are on the cusp of fiscal insolvency because of 3 things. Eric Adams, who is corrupt, the state, which has a $34 billion gap, talked to Tom DiNapoli, who said we got to close it, and Washington, who keeps tightening the screws. They cut food stamps, Medicaid, they're going to cut NYCHA funds, and we know the Trump administration is going to cut even more.
Now moving on to housing and cost of living, something that a lot of New Yorkers are thinking about. Over 400,000 are low-income households spending more than 50% of their income on rent. what do you plan to do to encourage more low-income housing and spur development?
First, we got to deal with the available apartments that exist. 6,000 in public housing. There's 335 projects in the city, about 717,000 units and people. And you say to yourself, how could a mayor allow 6,000 units in public housing to be empty for years? Find the families to fill that are desperately in need, might be, in fact, family shelters. Then you have rent-stabilized apartments, which has become a big issue because of Zoran Mamdani and his wife. 28,000 of those are empty. You got to find out from the landlords, why aren't you putting them in the marketplace? And the untold story, nobody tells it, most of the apartments that are empty are in the outer boroughs. They're not absentee landlords. They're landlords who live on the property. They may have 2, 3, 4 family house. When somebody dies or moves to Florida, they're not putting them up for rent any longer, even though their bills are skyrocketing, electricity, sewage, water, fees, fines. They'd rather take the loss than to deal with tenant-landlord court, which is a nightmare for all kinds of landlords. We got to level the playing field in tenant-landlord court. We pay for all the legal aid lawyers who help squatters and deadbeats. That's going to end.
Now, circling back to what you say about the rent stabilization and these apartments that have been warehoused, these 28,000 apartments, the complaint from these landlords has been that they don't have the money to upkeep them, in the sense of re-renting them out actually loses them money. So what would you do to address that? Obviously, one of your competitors is saying that he wants to freeze the rent. So how would you how would you address that? Would it be subsidies? What would the government do to step in here?
Well, first off, Zoran Mamdani can freeze the rent because he could appoint all 9 directors, which is what de Blasio did 2 years, he froze it, and Governor Cuomo did 1 year as governor. So all this, he can. The landlords aren't telling the truth. The reason they're not putting those apartments in the marketplace is because of squatters and deadbeats who won't pay the rent. During the lockdown and pandemic, Governor Cuomo said, you don't have to pay rent. You know how many people have not paid rent since 5 years later, and they still haven't been able to get them out of those apartments? That's the real story. I would sit down with all of them and say, look, we're going to find a way to make it so you don't have to deal with nightmare tenants. And you'll watch how quickly those units will be back into the marketplace. Then you start working on affordable housing. Like they have these 4 community jails. Remember, it was going to cost $8 billion. Now it's $16 billion. I'm the only candidate who says Rikers Island stays open. Cuomo and Zoran want to close it and go to these community jails. Take the bars off, retrofit them. There you go, more affordable housing.
Let's just circle back to the housing sense. When we're talking about these rent-stabilized apartments, right? Yes, there's some squatters in some of these, but the issue is, your opponent wants to freeze the rent. How would you be able to, I guess, get these apartments ready to be rented again, raise the rent, but while also sticking by what you've been saying throughout the campaign is kind of making the city more affordable as well? You guys have had very similar messages, just getting there much differently. How would you address that?
You sit with all the elements. Eric Adams raised the rent. He appointed his 9 directors. They voted 5-4 to raise the rent. It can be done, but it can be done fairly. And you talk with all parties. You talk with tenants, you talk with landlords, and then you talk with people who know the business, who will tell you the truth, and who's lying and who's telling the truth. I'm telling you, it's the fear of squatters and deadbeats that are keeping those apartments empty. It's worse to have a squatter and a deadbeat in a building because then everybody else thinks, well, if they're not paying rent, why should I pay rent? It's like fare evasion. If they're not paying their fare, why should I pay my fare?
Okay, Mr. Sliwa, why don't we shift to your mayoral foes here? We have 2 other people now since Eric Adams dropped out of the race. Are there any initiatives or any policies that they've been floating that you see yourself agreeing with and something you would take on if come mayor January 1?
No.
The shortest answer we're going to get from you.
Don't you understand? I'm a Republican. I'm clearly different than this 2-headed hydra. You got Zoran Mamdani, who nobody knows. So to describe him to the public, I said, did you like de Blasio? Oh, I hated him on the left and right. Think of de Blasio on steroids. And then Cuomo is Zoran light. Remember, no cash bail, raise the age, close Rikers Island, let illegal aliens vote, no sanctuaries, keep the sanctuary city. I don't see that much of a difference between Cuomo and Zoran Mamdani. I'm the only one who is clearly different. So when you say, do you see any of the proposals? Hey, how about nobody pays their bus fare? Because right now half the people don't pay their bus fare and nobody's doing enforcement. I'm mayor. You either pay your fare, you get a ticket. If you're a predicate offender, you go to jail. How about that? Doesn't that make sense? Isn't that the fair way of dealing with fare evasion?
So Mr. Lee, well, let's circle back to your former mayoral foe who dropped out of the race in the Eric Adams administration. Is there anything you've seen over the last 4 years that you would want to continue come January 1 if you were elected?
Oh, God, he was the best nightlife mayor we've ever had since Jimmy Walker to the break of dawn. You want him to come into a district, there are 51 councilmanic districts, open up a nightclub, and Eric could be there till 4 in the morning. Other than that, he was a disaster. The reason you have a Zoran Mamdani is because of Eric Adams' corruption. Imagine if he was a halfway decent mayor. There would never have been a Zoran Mamdani. Even his neighbors who didn't even know who Zoran Mamdani was a year ago, but he was able to rise through the ranks of the Democrats because Eric Adams couldn't even win a Democratic primary. Just imagine it would have been round 2, the incumbent Democrat Eric Adams versus Curtis Sliwa, the Republican, round 2. It's because of Eric Adams that there's Zoran Mamdani. Do you really think if he had done a halfway decent job that Cuomo would have left the Hamptons with his billionaire friends and tried to become mayor? No, he would have kept his powder dry. He would have tried to take out Kathy Hochul in a Democratic primary. But Eric Adams was such a disaster.
What about the police commissioner? Would you keep on Jessica Tisch?
Well, I don't think you have any choice because there's been so much chaos in one police plaza. Imagine you had Eddie Caban, corrupt police commissioner, and then you had Jeffrey Madry. That was like Caligula. I thought I was watching the movie Caligula on the 13th floor. And then every sycophant, toady, and lackey of Eric Adams was getting jobs in the police department. Phil Banks, unindicted co-conspirator. Timothy Pearson, 4 sexual harassment suits. He couldn't even meet in a room with a woman. And all of these were friends of Eric Adams. You say to yourself, he did this to himself. He did this to the people. So when he finally dropped out because the price was right, you think I'm sitting shiver for him? Good riddance. 1 down, 2 to go.
So let's pivot to Albany. You're going to have to work with Albany lawmakers and Governor Kathy Hochul, at least for the next year since she's going to an election. Where do you see your biggest opportunities to partner with the governor? And what will you see yourself doing in the first 6 months? And also note, she's going to an election year. So there's obviously going to be a little bit of a push and pull here.
Well, first, before we deal with that, let's go back to 1993. Rudy barely beat Dinkins to become mayor. And then the following year, somebody you couldn't have picked out of a lineup, George Pataki, beat the better Cuomo. I knew Mario Cuomo. Andrew is no Mario, right? You ended up with no chaos. Crime went down. No corruption with Rudy and Pataki. You have the opportunity of the 1-2 punch again. Republican Mayor Curtis Sliwa, Elise Stefanik beats Kathy Hochul. Stability will return. But how do I deal in the interim? Yeah. With a Kathy Hochul who doesn't even control the state legislature? Let's be honest. Cousin Stewart and the Speaker of the Assembly, Carl Hasey, control Albany. Kathy Hochul has no control of Albany. She is their prisoner. You have to go up. We got to sit down. Got to find out, hey, where can we actually break bread? Where can we not break bread?
So give us some solid example. What are some concrete things that you guys can meet in the middle here? Because obviously you are less of a Trump Republican. You're a New York City Republican. You've met in the middle with a lot of Democrats on a lot of different issues. You're talking about affordability. So where would you land with these Albany lawmakers to be able to make the city better?
Well, before you deal with Albany, you got to deal with the city council, the 51, many of them DSA. And I was lucky. I spent 13 years with Melinda Katz, who is now the Queen's DA. She's the mother of my 2 youngest sons. She was an assemblywoman, councilwoman, head of land use, borough president, DEA. She explained to me, you want to get to a city council person? She was at that time. Discretionary funds. You go into their district as mayor, you have a town hall meeting. They yell, they scream at you, you got to be a human piñata. Then the staff or the council person, they yell at you. You got to be a human piñata. And finally you say, I just need 1 vote. 1 vote. I know you need this project, a schoolyard. I know you need this road fixed. I've got the discretionary funds to do it. That's the way government operates. Eric Adams never did it that way. De Blasio to a degree because he had been in city council. You've got to get city council into a working relationship, and then you can address the state legislature because they are colleagues with one another.
Going back to Mayor Adams, evidently not your favorite person, he did select an extremely diverse leadership team. Many of them obviously have left, but he felt like that was the right choice because it reflected the city's diversity. How would you go about picking some of your top lieutenants if you were elected?
See, you say diversity, I say cronies. I remember when he was in Brownsville, Brooklyn, never ran, never will, he said. I actually lived in Brownsville. Have you ever seen so much chocolate in your life? I was like, wait a second, how about meritocracy? Do we really have men and women here who are the best that the city can offer? Or are they your friends? Are they your cronies? And it turned out that many of them were his cronies.
So who's on your short list?
Excuse me?
Who's on your short list?
Well, I'll tell you straight up, Robert Holden, Department of Education, because he would be great. And I would reach to a number of Democrats, like, for instance, Diane Savino, who has worked for almost every Democrat, including Eric Adams, knows all the unions. She's actually called me a chooch, which in Italian is a derogatory name. But if you're going to deal with the unions, you got to have somebody negotiating with them who's friends with them, not adversaries. And you'd be surprised at the number of Democrats, I can't name them because they may have a hard time once this program is seen, who would actually work with a Curtis Sliwa administration that they don't perceive of as being completely Republican.
And who's on your brain trust? John Catsimatidis? Any other big
Wait,
names
wait,
whose
wait.
cause
Let's
you
clear
take?
this stump. John Catsimatidis supported Eric Adams in 2021, right? Oh, you were aware of that?
I am aware.
Okay.
Yes, I'm letting you
John
talk.
Catsimatidis has not supported me in any of the. He's gone back and forth like everybody else. Cuomo Adams, like all the billionaires.
Okay, so do you have
Yes.
folks in your brain trust?
Somebody much better who's actually been
Who?
a leader in the state, George Pataki. He's my mentor. Larry Kudlow on the economy. Not bad, right? And people of that ilk who have given me guidance. State GOP Chairman Ed Cox. I was with the New York Partnership the other day, Catherine Wild. The only thing I had to do is I had to go in without my resume. See, there's sometimes I have to
We
take-
got it.
Yeah, you
There
got
we
it. Got it.
go.
You're a little tan line, but
Oh,
you know.
yes, a major tagline. But see, the Post is the paper of the working class people who like me with my red beret in the subways and streets. But no, there are a number of men and women who have given me guidance in a lot of different. I'm not omnipotent like every other candidate acts like they know everything. There are so many people in government who are dedicated civil servants who have never been given an opportunity to rise to the surface. I'll tell you the secret, you know, Craig. Every elected official, 97% of their time is dialing for dollars on the phone. The staff does all the work. The staff are dedicated. The staff have worked for other elected officials. They have great ideas. Promote it, bring it to the surface. You got to sign off on it. And guess what? At the press conference, when Craig is there and they queue up, guess who's going to be talking about those ideas? The people who designed it, the people who live it, breathe it, eat it. And I'm just going to be there to say, high five. That's the way we're going to go. Wouldn't that be refreshing to actually recognize people who do all the heavy lifting, who keep government going?
Well, the buck stops with you. That's the problem.
Of course, and I'll take the weight. But that is the problem at City Hall. They never give credit where credit is due. They're always out like a Pac-Man or Pac-Woman. My idea, my concept. If they had to explain it, they have no way to explain it if they didn't read it off the cue cards, who was provided by their staff members.
New York has avoided the National Guard being sent in the way we've seen in California, my hometown, Portland, Memphis. In part, that seems because of Adams' relationship with Trump. What is your relationship with Donald Trump, and how important do you think having that relationship with D.C. will be in a potential mayoral
Well, first off,
candidacy?
in 2024, because of the crisis in the subways, we had 1,000 National Guardsmen, 750 up until Debrina Cuomo. Think any of them remember that woman who was set on fire like a torch by that migrant? Of course not. Then Kathy sent in an additional 250 National Guards people. That's 1,000 National Guardsmen. I would say, Mr. President, there's nobody who knows more about crime in the United States than me. I have Guardian Angel chapters in a lot of these cities. I can tick off the number of places they need it. Memphis, Baltimore, I can go, Portland. There are areas that are out of control. Chi-Town, a.k.a. Chirac, as Spike Lee had it in his movie. New York doesn't need the National Guard under no circumstance.
So you have a good enough relationship to be able to talk to the president, to communicate that with him.
Yeah, but you have to do it preemptively. You have to talk with staff. The president is so busy. I've always said publicly about the president, Donald Trump, there are far more important issues. Peace in Russia and the Ukraine, and obvious what we see in Gaza. If the president can somehow bring peace to Gaza, that weakens Zoran Mamdani. that'll be like political kryptonite to him, because that's what he wants to run on. This way he doesn't have to talk about crime, quality of life, schools, all the basic issues that he's weak on.
Well, I guess on that note of Gaza and obviously everything that's happening in Israel, Eric Adams did create an office to combat anti-Semitism. Is that something that you would maintain? And are there any other policies that you would like to implement to sort of crack down on this rise in anti-Semitism?
One little pisher, one little Schmendrick led that office. You gotta be kidding. It was a one-person operation. And he did it all because he was trying to cultivate the Jewish folk. What did he do when they were rioting in the streets? When they were taking over Columbia University, did he go to Columbia? No, he flew off to Rome. He sat with the Pope, and the Pope patted him on the head and said, good job letting the migrants in. That evil Trump, oh. And Eric at that time, yes, Pope, yes, Pope. See, that's when he was the Biden of Brooklyn. Then all of a sudden he needed the money. He wanted to cultivate votes in the Jewish community. And then all of a sudden, why are the masks still on the demonstrators? You go to Nassau County, right, where Bruce Blakeman signed legislation, no mask. Here, Eric said, I'm going to take the mask off. And his police commissioner, Jessica Tesh, said, no, constitutionally we can't. Kathy Hochul said we can't. As Mayor Curtis Sliwa, you're damn right we can take those masks off. We'll follow in the footsteps of Bruce Blakeman in Nassau County, the safest county in America. It's just a few hundred feet away from New York City.
Building on that, so speaking of the migrant crisis, there's obviously still a lot of undocumented in the city, and obviously a big storyline that's coming in nationally is working with ICE. How would you, as mayor, work with the federal officials in dealing with any undocumented or anybody that's here illegally?
Because see, I've been the only consistent one. When Cuomo was governor, he called ICE thugs. And then remember, Trump came in Brentwood and Central ICE slip and said, no, all agencies are going to deal with getting rid of MS-13. They did an amazing job, and ICE led the way. Then ICE was revitalized with the re-election of Donald Trump president. And at first, Tom Homan had him doing all the right things, going after all the bad hombres. People were cheering in the streets. Narco-terrorists, sex traffickers, gang members, drug dealers. Great. Then somebody in Washington imposed a quota. Quotas never work. Just look at stop and frisk. It was a disaster. And so now ICE agents tell me, Curtis, I have to meet a quota. The bad hombres know how to hide in the shadows because that's what criminals do. They make it hard for you to get them. So now I got to go to the courthouse where somebody's coming through. They had come through the portal. They were told, do it the right way, come through the portal. We parole you into the system, into the country, and then this is the court date you have to go to. And they've been going to their court dates. Why are we snatching them up and planning to deport them? And I would say, as mayor, everyone is entitled to due process. Even if you got tattoos, that say MS-13 or some gang, macheteros, whatever, you still are entitled to due process. If you plead out or you're found guilty, you do your time in a local jail or prison, then ICE deports you to your country of origin.
So then what would you do as mayor then? We've had Zoran Mamdani saying he wants to hire 200 more lawyers. You have Cuomo saying very similar things. So what would you do then to protect it? Because between the three of you, you're all saying very similar things.
No more lawyers. Come on. We've given migrants everything, including culturally appropriate food that Eric Adams said, they won't eat a bagel and a schmear. Let's Grubhub them con arroz habichuelas with a chuleta on top. That ain't happening. So the fact is the migrants have gotten way too much. I'm the mayor of our people, the homeless, the destitute, the emotionally disturbed, the veterans. In this recent bloated $118 billion budget, you know what the city council did with Eric Adams, Adrian Adams, and Justin Brannan, who is the financial chairman? They gave $55 million more to migrants and only $4 million to veterans. Yet on Veterans Day, we love our veterans, Memorial Day, July 4th, Flag Day. Did they even know in July when Flag Day is June 14th? Do you think any of these candidates know? Because they weren't flying American flags on June 14th, I can tell you that.
And just for clarity, budget is $115 billion, but let's move on to some safety things.
118.
115.
118.
It's going to be 120 with the projected gap next year.
Exactly, thank you.
But it's 115 this year. So let's move on to safety. It's something that marred a lot of Adams' administration were these crazy incidents. You brought it up before, a person getting set on fire on the subway. So what would your plan to be reducing that? Obviously, a lot of this is mental health. It's a lot of homelessness. It's a lot of things that Eric Adams has had a lot of blowback for, removals off the street. So how would you address that, and what would your plan be moving forward?
Craig, I'm in the streets and subways all the time. I haven't seen anybody removed. I see the same homeless people all the time. I'm on a first-name basis with them, the same emotionally disturbed. I know first it was de Blasio who had that fake, phony, fraudulent program, Thrive, that took $1.5 billion of our money, never helped any emotionally disturbed. They all talk a good game, but they don't do anything. You got to go into the shelters first. There's 330 shelters run by the Department of Homeless Services. Most of them are unsafe, especially Micah. That was for the mentally ill and those who are chemically addicted. It's like one flew over the cuckoo's nest. No discipline whatsoever. So it's Darwinian survival of the fittest. I talk to these men and women all the time. They don't want to stay in the shelters, so they're in the parks, the streets, and the subways. You create a safe shelter system. We used to have homeless outreach in the NYPD. They knew how to do it. And how did they get disbanded? Oh, that's right. De Blasio took $1 billion out of the police budget. They all danced to Tarantella and City Council. They disbanded the homeless outreach unit. Did Eric Adams ever put that $1 billion back into the budget? No, he gave $7 billion of our dollars to people we don't even know, migrants. That's the real story. You put the money back. You bring the homeless outreach unit back, or police officers who knew the shelter operators, knew who's doing the security, knew their clients. You know right now that a police officer cannot go into a shelter unless there's a 911 call, because Department of Homeless Services says, oh, it'll traumatize the clients, they'll get post-traumatic shock syndrome. If a cop is walking a beat outside, I got to go use the bathroom. Sorry, you can't use the bathroom. Isn't that crazy? Now, this is the administration of Eric Adams that started with Bill de Blasio. The former cop never changed that. It's all going to change when I'm mayor. I'm the law and order mayor. I'm back to common sense. Think of me as Rudy Giuliani 2.0. That's an easy way, right? We know Zoran is de Blasio on steroids. Think of Curtis Sliwa as Rudy Giuliani 2.0, who will delegate like Bloomberg did. See, I'm a nice hydra there.
So the polls have been stuck, right? We've been at this since the primary. I know you weren't really campaigning from the primary because you didn't have any challenger. We have Mamdani sitting at mid-40s. We have Cuomo sitting in the mid-20s. Now, even with Eric Adams out, we have you're polling in the teens. What's the path to victory here? What do you do in the next 4 weeks?
First off, how can you trust the polls? They had Cuomo at one point up 40 points on Zoran Mamdani. He got his butt kicked by 13 points. Remember the presidential election? We were told right before November 4th, oh, it's neck and neck, Harris-Trump. He won the 7 battleground states. He won the popular vote.
That was within the margin of error, though.
I understand, but polls, come on.
But also we have to
polls don't elect officials.
Right, but also we were talking about him adding 100,000 voters in the primary. All these polls were based on the 2021 model. Cuomo actually did get more votes than Eric Adams did, and Eric Adams won in 2021.
Oh, God. Boy, you drinking that Cuomo Kool-Aid, right?
I'm just saying, how are you going to
why Cuomo lost. He's lazy. He mailed it in. He hung out in the end. He still is not doing retail politics.
But we're asking about your path to victory, because you're...
My path to victory, okay.
Here at 17%, pretty stubborn.
Well, that's what you say. Okay, we have internal polls that say
What
different.
are the internal polls?
I start with 28% that I had the last time. I don't see my voters suddenly abandoning the Curtis Sliwa wagon. Now, also, the independent voters who never properly get sampled is 2.5 times the number of Republicans. I used to lead an independent party, the Reform Party. I was the chairman until that same Andrew Cuomo destroyed all the third parties, trying to destroy the Working Families Party, because how dare you, Cynthia Nixon, challenge me for governor? And what did he succeed in doing? He destroyed Independence Party, the Green Party, Libertarian Party, Reform Party, and strengthened the Working Families Party that's biting him in the neck. So I know the mind of the independent. I have some moderate Democrats, and the secret path to victory, created by my wife Nancy, the first ever independent line in electoral politics: protect animals, no kill shelters, animal abusers go to jail. There are a lot of single issue voters out there, a lot of women. They love animals. They'll vote for me on that line. Might never have voted for a Republican before. That's my path.
Okay, so your internal polling suggests right now close to 30%. And then you believe, I would presume, that Mamdani and Cuomo will split the remaining votes.
Well, they're at each other's throats. Nobody likes that. especially women. Women are the majority of the voters. Everybody knows that. In fact, Trump recognized
More
that.
important.
Not only that, they're the majority of the workers. They raise the kids, many of them in single-parent households. This campaign has not talked to women. I don't see him talking to women. My wife did my very first commercial, and for the first time in history, I was quiet. I was standing at her side because she talked about all the time women are perved on, harassed. They're not safe to go in the streets and in the subways. They have to be providers. They have to work late night. And in a women's world, it's not what these two guys have been talking about. I can tell you that. And by the way, how come they don't ride the subways? They have armed guards, right? What are they afraid of in the subways? I have no armed guards. I'm by myself.
So just to summarize, so we're looking at a big swath of Republicans trying to carve off a bunch of independents at this point, and hoping that in pushing for the women's vote here will get you up into the mid-30s.
And the animal lovers vote.
And the animal lovers vote. Okay.
So now, why would I even rely on polls when we got a month to go? I've raised more money than all three combined locally. I now have TV commercials galore going up. I have headquarters in 10 areas of the city. I don't see any of their headquarters. And I'm to drop out for the king of dropouts, Cuomo, who dropped out when he was running against Carl McCall for governor. And then when he feared impeachment, he dropped out and ran to the Hamptons. Trump, look how many times he was impeached. Did he ever leave Washington to go to Mar-a-Lago? No. When he was the subject of lawfare here, he went to court every day, Alvin Bragg's court with Tish James. He never ran. He never hid. Cuomo is the king of dropouts. If anybody should drop out, it should be Andrew Cuomo.
You've said that you were offered up to $10 million in these jobs or anything like that. Can you name any of the places that were offering you jobs?
No, because I warned all of them. In the aftermath, you do it again, I go to Alvin Bragg. And more importantly, Herson Barrero, who supports Cuomo, who is a contributor to New York One, the former editor of El Diario, verified everything that I said that very night with Errol Lewis on New York One. He goes, Curtis is not lying. I know the people who called on behalf of Cuomo. I know what they offered him. He turned them down. Next person who calls me, I'm wired up like a Christmas tree. Alvin Bragg, I'll be coming there with the recording.
And have you spoken with Donald Trump in the last year?
No, I've had a love-hate relationship with Donald Trump over the years. At times we've received awards together. We praised one another. Other times we've been at odds. I haven't been invited to Mar-a-Lago. I haven't been invited to the White House. He was first.
I don't know if you can wear the beret there.
Yeah, wait, but he's got the MAGA hat, right?
That's true.
this
You both have the red
know.
hats.
Hey,
You
I
make
had a
good
red
point.
hat before.
And
Donald
so
Trump had the
no
red
one
hat.
from the White House, the Trump admin, has been reaching out to you in
No,
order
but
to
think
get
about
you
it. There was a time
cush job.
where Eric Adams, who had 7 burner phones, was talking to the president on a regular basis. Then he dropped Eric Adams because he realized the guy was done, one and done. The price was right. He was leaving. Then he's talked with Andrew Cuomo. We know they talk a lot. Hey, they're family friends. Both of their fathers, used to get together. Mario with Fred, they had, a good relationship. I don't mind that. But Andrew's a liar. He goes out to the Hamptons. I talked to Trump. He's going to get Curtis out of the race. Yeah, how did that work out? Then he comes into New York City. I'm going to take on Donald Trump. Which Andrew Cuomo is it?
Okay, so you haven't spoken with Donald Trump, but
No.
you're not willing to say any of the places that offer you jobs.
No, but the next person who does know, they're on blast. That's a term we use in the street.
Maybe the previous person is going to get reported by the New York Post.
That could be. You guys are the best at it, right? You have enough leads. You have Herson Barrero. How come you're not knocking on his door?
None of the sports teams in the city?
Oh, Yankees. No, if you're a real sports fan, not like Eric Adams. Oh, I like the Mets and the Yankees. No, real. I'm a Yankee fan. I hate the Mets. If you're a Met fan, you should hate the Yankees. Like the Knicks, the Nets, Mets and Poco. Giants, Jets. I'm not like Andrew Cuomo. Oh, I like the Buffalo Bills because they're in New York. What person in New York City likes the Buffalo Bills? So I'm a real sports fan who's actually done sports radio 3 times and been fired on sports radio.
I think we covered a lot of territory. We really appreciate you taking the time. I know it's been
Wait, I
a very busy month.
just got warmed up here.